Hey guys, it's Cameron, my review for Brightburn. And what Brightburn is essentially about is we center on this couple who basically one day they found this spaceship, there was this child there, and they decided that because they couldn't have children, they decided that they were going to adopt him. And basically, from there, we learn that he does have these superpowers, but he seems to be turning towards evil. And basically, after all of these what seem like random occurrences start to happen within Brightburn, people are getting murdered, people are disappearing. His parents in the film start to realize that, hey, he may be connected to all of them and may be a genuine threat to the entire world, and that's really all I'm going to say. So Brightburn overall, I was very excited for this film. Just the initial premise alone, I think, is very intriguing. This idea of, basically having Superman, but like, what if he was to turn towards darkness? That's an idea that very much did hook me in for sure. But also knowing that James Gunn had something else coming out, even though he's not directing it, I was excited to see how that would turn out. And just in general, this is one of the most original type of horror films that I can think of in a while. And I was very excited to see how it would turn out. And I will say this, Brightburn overall, it is a good time, but it is not as good as I think it could have been. There are definitely some significant areas where I do think this film does falter a bit, but we are getting into it right now, starting off with the cast. And look, I'll say this, from an acting perspective, everyone's pretty great here. Everyone really does do a great job. Easily the standout, though, is Elizabeth Banks. I thought she was fantastic here, probably giving one of my favorite performances from her, because this is a character who, on the surface, she could be really dumb, but you also see her desire of wanting to have a child and wanting to connect with someone, and the fact that she does bond with Brandon, and they have this sort of connection, you can understand why she, when he starts to turn towards darkness, why she doesn't, really feel like he is capable of doing something so inhumane. And you see that in her, but you also see how that is how she's starting to veer away from that, how she's very conflicted in the film. And I thought overall, she had some really great moments, particularly in the third act. I thought she was really great here. She definitely gave a very good performance, and I was overall very impressed by her. But someone who very much impressed me was Jackson A. Dunn as, of course, Brandon. I thought he was fantastic. Now, I haven't seen this kid in really anything before, but after this film, I definitely think we're going to see more of him. I mean, just the way he was able to portray the rage of this character and his basically disregard for humanity in general and how annoyed he is getting with society and things like that. I thought he did a very good job with when he starts to turn towards darkness. It's very believable. It never comes across as too over the top, and I think overall he did a really great job here. He poured a lot of emotion into this role that I feel like a lesser actor would not have been able to convey, but he did a really great job, and I was very impressed by him here. The rest of the cast also is very good. David Denman, I thought, was fantastic, as he usually is, as Kyle, the father, of course, of Brandon. I thought he definitely did a really good job. And the chemistry between the three is really well done, even though it is a tough relationship, because you genuinely don't know if Brandon actually cares about his parents. They do a really good job with showing that dynamic, especially when it comes to Elizabeth Banks' character, who, like I said, is firmly by Brandon's side almost throughout the entire film, and they do a very good job with that, for sure. But now I really want to get to the directing here, which it's not directed by James Gunn. I know that might be surprising for some, but it is directed by David Yarovesky, who I thought did a really good job for the most part. He does a very good job of blending both superhero elements and horror elements, and I thought both of those things were done really well, especially when he will take certain things and, that we view in superhero movies, and usually there are these triumphant moments, there's this very positive sort of music that plays, but here it's far more dark, and I thought he did a very good job with that. He really does go all out when it comes to the horror elements. The film is genuinely terrifying at points, and I thought for the most part he did a really good job with the directing, but also when it comes to the family drama, the family aspect, I thought was also really well done. The character drama, I mean, I thought his directing here, he definitely had a good idea of what he wanted to do, and I was overall impressed by it. The writing is where things get a little messy for me, because I will say this, the basic story is really well done. They do a good job of showing that this kid clearly is evil, and that these two parents, they're trying to figure out, what's going on. All these mysterious happenings are going on, and they start to feel, obviously, that he may be connected to it. And I like the way that they do set that whole story up. I think they did a good job with that overall. The writing is where things get a little messy for me, because I will say this, the central plot, it is really well done. They establish that clearly this kid, he's turning towards darkness, and all these, mysterious happenings start to happen, and the parents start to realize that he may be connected to it all. That stuff is good. The bonding between the three, it's really good. The way that they start to turn against their son, I think that story is well done, especially quieter moments between Elizabeth Banks and David Denman, and seeing their different perspectives on things, because David Denman, pretty much from the beginning, he starts to realize, yeah, there's something up. But Elizabeth Banks' character, on the other hand, she is a little bit more lenient towards that. She's a little bit more conflicted over whether or not it is possible for him to do something like that. And in lesser horror films, this character would be a complete idiot. You would think, how could you possibly believe that? But because of the rationale they give her, and again, because of that desire she has to have a child and things like that, you're able to buy into that motivation. I thought overall, you can understand where she is coming from in that regard, and I thought they definitely did a very good job with that. So that story is very well played out. Again, the way they show how he is turning towards darkness, I think that's good. But my biggest issue with this film is that I think it's a little bit underwritten. And in fact, I think it's very underwritten. I mean, pretty much from the beginning of this film, there is no there is no confliction within this kid. He is very much turning towards darkness, and it just gets more and more extreme throughout the film, and that's not the problem I have with that. I get that that's what they were trying to do, but I personally feel like it would have been that much more effective if we would have had a first act of him being good and him seeing the type of person he was trying to be before he turned towards darkness, maybe moments of him trying to become a good person, trying to become that superhero that we want him to be, but him reverting back to that darkness. It's just not there. It's a little too obvious that he's going to turn dark, and I think obviously we knew that from the trailers, but I think of how much more effective it would be if we didn't know that. If we didn't know that he was going to turn dark, I think it would have been far more effective if they did that, if there was more like of a confliction in him. But like I said, pretty much from the beginning, you know that he wants to be evil. He knows that he is inherently bad. He's the opposite of, what we view Superman as, and I think while they did a good job with that, the writing just felt a little underwritten there. I like the family dynamic, I like what they were trying to do, but I just felt we needed a little bit more in terms of the screenplay, and also his motivation is a little bit unclear. You have a basic idea of what he wants to do. He wants to take over the world, but why does he want to take over the world? What's his reasoning for this? What is his greater purpose, essentially? We don't really know. I mean, the film does do a good job at showing that this is a kid that is constantly picked on. I mean, people think he's very weird and odd, which they should. I mean, he's very eccentric, he's very quiet, he's constantly drawing these weird things, he's far more intelligent than any other kid of his age. He's wise beyond his years in that way, and you can see how people are very put off by that, but you can also see how that starts to really, eat up on him. It really starts to eat away any sense of goodness that he had, and that's something that they did do a good job with. But I just feel like for the first hour of this film, it should have been us seeing him in a good place. It should have been us seeing him, legitimately happy with his parents, because I think that would have made that moment much more effective. And while it was still effective, I think they could have done a better job with that overall. So really, that's my issue with the writing. I think that the story, it's just a little too basic, and I think if they would have tapped into, if they would have furthered the story a little bit more and added a couple more, actually 20 or 30 more minutes, I think it would have been a little bit more effective overall. I will say, though, the one thing you definitely cannot complain about is the cinematography. I mean, it is fantastic here. Not just in terms of his powers, which they do a very good job with developing for sure, but in terms of the horror, I mean, this film is so creative when it comes to its kills. Just the way that he completely demolishes so many of these characters, the way that he just mutilates them and things like that. It's not what you would expect. I thought there was some really cool stuff. One especially involving this car chase. I don't want to get into it too much, but what they decide to do with that, I thought was really cool. And holy shit, this film is more graphic than I was expecting. There was one moment especially, I mean, I was not expecting them to go that dark, but they go for it, and I very much appreciate that. The film, honestly, after I'd say the end of the first act, is basically a slasher, and it's all the better for it. I mean, they really do not hold back when it comes to the blood, when it comes to the carnage, and that's something that I really did love about the film. I love when a film just isn't afraid to get its hands dirty, when it isn't afraid to get really dark, and it isn't afraid to push a lot of boundaries, and that's the kind of film that this is, and I thought they did a really great job with that overall. The cinematography, it's very well done here. They do a very good job, like I said, with his powers and things like that. It looks believable. Nothing about it looks like CGI, and considering that this is a film that wasn't really that costly, it sticks out that much more, and I thought they did a good job with that. The score I really did like here. There are definitely moments where, again, they try to channel sort of a heroic vibe, but it always is trumped by the more sort of, darkness that's looming throughout the entire film, and I think they did a very good job with that. And the editing, like I said, that's another problem I have with this film. I think if they would have made this film 20 or 30 minutes longer, it would be that much more effective, because what we have here is still very well done. I'm not saying that this isn't a good film, because it is, but if they would have added a little bit more, and we would have gotten to see Brandon as a good person, and we would have seen him a bit more conflicted, then I think overall it would have been more effective, because like I said, from the beginning, we basically know that he is evil, and we know that he is going to turn towards darkness, and there isn't much suspense in that way. Overall, though, I really enjoyed this film. I think it's very creative. I think it's very different from most horror films out there. It's extremely graphic, which I very much appreciated. The ending of the film also was not where I was expecting it to go, and I honestly would want to see more. Like, if they are trying to make a franchise out of this, I would honestly be down for it, because they have some really interesting places they can take this series for sure, and I would be interested in seeing if they do decide to turn this into a franchise. I think overall, this is just a very creative film, and while I do think it does, like I said, it is slightly hampered by some of those aspects that I talked about, and some of those things I think are just a little bit underwritten. Overall, this is still a really well done horror film, and I am going to give Brightburn overall a B-. So over, guys, in my review of Brightburn. Let me know what you guys saw this morale, left your thoughts, and we'll see you guys in my next video, and I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.